Welcome to our Musar study group. I am Batya Gage. So glad you joined us today as we work together on strengthening our midot, our character traits. Well, I'm so glad that you've joined us today, but more, I should say, I'm glad to be back. A lot has happened since we were together last. Um, the election happened, or didn't happen, or we're waiting on the results of all of that mess. Then my husband was hospitalized for a week with severe COVID symptoms, but he's finally back home and recovering. And our shul became official. Our new shul became official these last few weeks. We now have an actual name since we met together last, and we are Magen Yishenu, which means shield of our salvation. And that's all being approved by the state of Texas, so we are official. And we had a baby in our shul, and we had a family have a baby boy, and the baby's already had his Brit and waiting on a couple of more births within our shul. So it's been quite a lot of happenings in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And believe it or not, Thanksgiving is next week, if you can believe that. We are enjoying some exceptionally beautiful fall weather here in Texas. I hope you are as well where you are. And I'm trying to get outside as much as I can right now while it is still beautiful. In fact, I plan, hopefully tonight, if it's not too cold after dark, to maybe get outside and hopefully the skies will be clear. And there's some talk of possibly a meteor shower. So take advantage of all of that. Our study group is studying 2 books this fall. The first one is The Spiritual Practices of Good Actions. And that's a very basic Musar study book. We've talked many times about going back to the basics, and that's a very basic Musar study book. So if you've never done Musar before, that's a good place to start. Our second book that we're using for the next year is the Musar Torah Commentary. And that I love that book. That book goes through each Torah portion and seeks out a related midot, a character trait to study that relates to the Torah portion. Last time we were together, we studied humility. Today, we study one of our favorite midot, and that is the trait of patience. And if you're following along in the book, we're in chapter 6. And you know what they say about patience? Never, never pray for patience. Because you know what happens next is that you are given an opportunity to practice patience. And very often, as I've been teaching Musar for the last couple of years, Hashem provides opportunities for me to learn, practical ways for me to learn the lesson, usually the one coming up. So he usually gives me these lessons in advance. And this was no exception. Over the last couple of weeks, I sat in an emergency room twice for hours on end, sometimes in the middle of the night, waiting on news, waiting on tests for my husband, and it just seemed like forever. And then when he was admitted to the hospital after the second time, of course, I wasn't allowed to visit. And so knowing that he was trying to recover and try to get some rest, I did not call him. So I just waited for him when he felt like it to text me or try to call me. And again, my patience was tested. But I've also learned how much patience it takes to be a caregiver. I admire all of you that are caregivers, either professionally or for family members, because that takes another extraordinary amount of patience. Probably I should have studied this chapter on patience in advance of the last couple of weeks, but it gave me good preparation for studying this lesson. Recently, while trying to avoid all the current events in the news, I was reminded of a really old song, and I'm probably going to show my age here, but it was from the 1960s by Dionne Warwick. In fact, I think Coca-Cola used it at one time for one of their commercial promotions. And it goes like this, and you can probably fill in the blanks or sing along. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. And I think right now we could all agree with that for sure as we get glimpses of what's going on in the world and in the news in our country. But as I'm humming that song in my head and singing along, I'm again reminded of a passage of verses that Rav Shaul wrote in 1 Corinthians 13, a famous passage on love, and it helps us define what love really is. It's not holding hands around the world and drinking a Coke together. Obviously not. If you haven't read that whole passage of 1 Corinthians 13 in a while, I would encourage you to do so and look at it this time through the lens of Musar and see how many character traits you can pull out of that one passage on love. But the first thing that that passage says is, and you probably can quote it, love is patient. Our author starts this chapter on patience by reminding us that every one of us, every human being, has a divine spark, a spark of Hashem within us. And we know that Hashem's, all of his character traits are in perfect balance. We're always talking about in Musar, the traits need to be in perfect balance, and his are. And if we are created in his image, then we must have the capacity to also have our character traits in perfect balance. Our author also reminds us, however, that we as humans also have baggage. We all know that we carry on baggage, all those hurts and disappointments and traumas that have come to us through our life have affected us in some way. And we kind of carry that baggage with us. And that baggage begins to block, like a dark cloud, the light of our divine spark. And he humorously gives us the example of a car windshield that the birds have pooped all over. And if you try to run out and jump in your car and drive off without cleaning your windshield, it can be very hard to see. So you have to stop and clean your windshield. Our baggage not only blocks our light from shining out, but it blocks our vision, like our dirty windshield, from seeing the divine spark in others. When we feel impatient, we're not able at that point to see the divine spark, or we have refused to see the divine spark in another human being. So the first step in learning or strengthening patience is to become aware and to search for, to look for that divine spark in every other human being. So what is patience exactly? Patience is our ability to calmly endure an uncomfortable situation, especially those situations in which we have little or no control. Those are the times that are most fraught for impatience. And so patience is being able to calmly endure at that time. Like sitting in an emergency room hours for in. Impatience in a situation like that only adds gasoline to a fire. Unfortunately, quite a few years ago, I experienced a very difficult situation in which a close family member was terminally ill in the hospital. Other family members had become very impatient with the nursing staff, in fact, going to the extent of being very rude and aggressive. And so when I went up there to visit and tried to get information from the nursing staff, they promptly informed me, we will not talk to anyone from this family because of this the impatience of this other party. So it just made a bad situation that much worse. The Hebrew word for patience is savlanut, savlanut, and it comes from a word that means to carry a heavy burden. So again, patience is bearing the burden of a difficult situation until it is over. When we are in a situation that we have no control over, what is the cure? You're in a situation, you're sitting in a hospital, waiting on news, waiting on tests, whatever you're having to endure, patience is the cure. Patience can make even the heaviest burden lighter. It can make the most difficult situation so much easier to bear. In the classic Musar text, Heshbon HaNefesh, which maybe we'll study one of these days, Rabbi Levine writes this: "Woe to the pampered man who has never been trained to be patient. Either today or in the future, he is destined to sip from the cup of affliction. Moreover, he is beset with vain regret, like those unfortunate boors who are full of meaningful remorse." Our author points out that in this passage, Rabbi Levine is connecting our midot of patience to the midot of humility. Woe to the pampered man. Obviously, the pampered man has an inflated sense of importance and ego and feels like the rest of the world should just revolve around him to his benefit. And when we lose patience, we suffer affliction. We say things and do things that we certainly will regret later that make the situation worse. So we bring affliction onto ourselves. But on the other hand, is it possible to have too much patience? What does too much patience look like? I don't have that problem, but perhaps some do. Too much patience leads a person to inaction when change really needs to be incorporated. The person with too much change will, for instance, stay in a terrible no-end job because they don't want to take action. They continue to tell themselves things will get better. I'll just wait. I'll be patient, and things never get better. Being too patient or having too much patience out of balance is about being passive. But on the other hand, when we have too little patience, what does it look like? It looks like anger and frustration. Situations that are already not ideal get worse as we layer on these emotions of impatience and anger and frustration. For example, if you think about you're in a hurry and you're in line behind someone in the grocery store and they're just taking forever, or the clerk is chit-chatting with the person checking out and it's just taking forever. Or another one that seems to get a lot of people is in traffic when you're trying to get somewhere in a hurry and the person in front of you is going below the speed limit and you just want them to get out of your way. Our author points out that impatience is especially comes up in relationships and especially in marriage relationships. How much of our impatience comes from hurt that the other person has not met our needs in some way? You know, how often do we hear the Yetzer Hara saying, if he or she loved you, he or she would whatever, fill in the blank. And that is probably the Yetzer Hara. These thoughts are self-centered. They're not centered on others. They're centered on ourselves. They are about us. And then we have to go back as we're working on patience and work on humility. Think about it. To demand that a spouse do a particular chore in a particular way at a particular time, or the driver should move over or speed up just so you can go your way, that is taking up too much space on that bench of humility. If you don't remember what that means, go back and reread Everyday Holiness. Humility is taking up the appropriate space for you on a bench, metaphorically. But when you're wanting others to cater to your needs all of the time, and without any regard to theirs, you're taking up too much space on that bench. I don't know how many of you have teens or have raised teens in the past, but he likens the raising of teens to the Israelites wandering in the desert. He said, first of all, there just is no shortcut. You just have to endure with patience those years as the teens are learning, making mistakes, growing, maturing. And we all know that when the Israelites were in the desert, there was a much shorter route to the promised land than the route that they ended up taking. But they needed that extra time, that 40 years in the desert, to work through the adolescence or the teen years of their development. When given the opportunity to take a quicker route, they reacted with fear. And they said, we just want to go back to Egypt and be slaves. They were not ready for the responsibilities of a free people. And these 40 years gave them time to learn from their mistakes, to gain wisdom, to mature, much as a teenager does. Their only option, as is the same for the parents of teenagers, is patience. Our author gives us another example, one that many in America right now might be experiencing, and that is of extended unemployment. You do what you can. You create your resume, you send it out, you distribute it to the right places, and then you have to wait and you wait. And sometimes the answers come very slowly or not at all. And it gives us this opportunity, this waiting, to have time to do very positive things with the time while we wait. There's an old great Christian song by Lincoln Brewster called While I Wait. And you can Google the lyrics, they're very good, but some of them go like this. I live by faith and not by sight. Sometimes miracles take time. While I wait, I will worship you. I'll worship your name, Lord. While I wait, I will trust you. So rather than being frustrated, worried, impatient during this waiting period, it gives us an opportunity to do positive things, to learn a new skill, read some books, clean out a closet, whatever, while we're waiting on things to happen. Our author wraps up this discussion on patience with another reminder, however, that patience is not the right tool in every given situation. If you're in an abusive situation, abusive relationship, or an abusive job or anything else, patience is not the tool you want to pull out and use. Action is needed, and probably quick and swift action. Patience, like every other trait that we study or try to strengthen, must always be in the appropriate and right balance. As he ends this chapter, he always gives us the practice, the work for the week that we need to do. And daily, as is true in all midot that we practice, he suggests coming up with a reminder phrase. Something that you can write on a little card or a sticky note, put on your mirror or by your coffee pot, something that will remind you every day of the midot that you're focusing on for the week. And in this particular case, for patience, the suggestion is, this too shall pass, and I have the strength to get by until it does. That's a good one. You may have your own, but write your reminder phrase. Say it out loud every day to yourself. The next thing is to observe how patience is playing out in your daily life throughout the week, or if you're doing it on a 2-week basis. Notice those times when you feel impatient. What was it that caused it? What was the trigger? Perhaps it was a lack of humility. Perhaps you were wanting others to cater to your needs. Or perhaps that you're on the other side. Perhaps you're stuck in too accepting of a situation that actually needs change. Do you need less or more patience? How can you balance your patience? So just observe yourself in these situations. Then, as always, journal those things. Write them down, the things that triggered your impatience or things you've noticed about your own life. And after a few days, you can go back and look at what you've written. Perhaps there's a pattern there. Perhaps it's always traffic, and you can find a different way to handle traffic. Perhaps there's some other trigger. And then act. Musar is no good without action. So when an opportunity arises to strengthen your midot of patience, first of all, remind yourself in this situation right now, it is okay to be patient. Give thanks for the opportunity to strengthen your midot of patience. It's like swimming. You can read about it, study about it, but until you get in the water, you don't really learn to swim. Think about someone you know that has perfectly balanced patience. Meditate or visualize on that person. How would that person have acted in a situation in which you weren't quite so patient? Because remember, we say this over and over, external actions affect internal emotions. So if you can visualize how that person may have handled a situation and then act accordingly, it can help you perhaps to strengthen your midot of patience. I also posted a really good video speaking about external actions affecting internal emotions, and I posted it on our Facebook group. It's by Prager University, Dennis Prager. I love to listen to him, and he has some great short little videos. And this was on our moral obligation to be happy. But basically, he says in order to be happy, act happy. External actions affect internal emotions. The next thing is to look for the divine spark in other people, even when you're not being impatient. Put your phone down, observe people, look at people, look for that divine spark in everyone. Watch their faces. Try to see that spark shining out. Speak more or speak less. Whichever applies in your case. If you're usually very talkative, speak less. If you are afraid to speak up, look for an opportunity in which you can speak up more. Meditate at times that you are not feeling impatient. You want to strengthen your midot ahead of the battle, as you would. So meditate when you're quiet, when you're not being impatient, when you're not in a situation, and that will help you to strengthen your midot when you need it. And one of my very favorites, you get into a stressful situation, sing. Sing. If you're in the car and traffic is driving you crazy and you're becoming impatient, sing. Because it's really hard to stay impatient and angry and frustrated when you're singing a happy song. If you're behind that really slow person at the checkout counter, think and start humming a happy tune. If you're at work and you're just feeling yourself becoming impatient, turn on some inspiring, beautiful, inspirational music. You'll be surprised at the difference that singing and music can make towards our patience. All right, that's our chapter in that book. So let's turn to our other book. This week, our Torah portion is Toldot. Toldot is a tough Torah portion to study, especially when you're studying Musar. And we'll look at why. Earlier, I said that what the world needs now is love, sweet love. But in these days, here we are enduring, not always patiently, a very tough situation following a very contentious election in which we're still waiting for recounts, and there is accusations of fraud, wide scale fraud. Um, what do we really crave right now more than anything else? What would you guess? What we're craving is truth. We want to know the truth. That's what we're all looking for, is the truth. And that is a midot that is not only missing in our society in America today, but it's also missing in our Torah portion this week. We're on page 37 of the Musar Torah commentary. As you read through Toldot, just even if you read through it very quickly, the very first thing you have got to notice is all of the lies and deceit that go on throughout this whole Torah portion. In the very first interaction that we see early in the Torah portion between the two brothers, between Jacob and Esau, Jacob tricks Esau out of his birthright because Esau is hungry, and he says, okay, I'll give you food, but you got to sell me your birthright for this food. Then we quickly learn that Isaac deceived Abimelech when he told him that Rivkah was his sister and not his wife, because he was afraid that Abimelech would kill him and take his wife. Then we go right from there into Rivkah, Jacob's mother, encouraging and helping Jacob to deceive his father out of the blessing. He was going to bless Esau as the firstborn, but Jacob goes in and deceives his father and tells his father that he is Esau. So it's just filled with lies and deceit. So are we humans just incapable of telling the truth? Is it just not possible to be truthful? But truth is a very complicated subject, and we could spend weeks on this one midot, and we have studied it in depth in the past, and we have seen and discussed and struggled with some very difficult situations regarding truth. In Bereshit Rabbah 8:5, we have a midrash, a very interesting midrash, that gives us a little glimpse into the reality of truth in human beings. And it goes like this. Rabbi Shimon taught that when the Blessed Holy One decided to create the first human, the ministering angels divided into opposing blocks, some of whom said that humans should not even be created, while others said that humans should indeed be created. The angel of Chesed, of loving kindness, and the angel of justice argued in favor of the creation of human beings, who would strive to do acts of loving kindness and justice. But the angel of truth and the angel of peace disagreed. The angel of peace argued that humans would be entirely made up of conflict. And the angel of truth argued that humans would be entirely made up of lies. In response, the Blessed Holy One flung the angel of truth to the earth, whereupon all the other ministering angels gathered around and said, but Master of all the worlds, is not truth your seal? Raise truth back up from the earth. Very interesting midrash. The angel of truth was correct. Human beings are made up of lies. Even as young children, one of the first things we do as young children is learn to lie to get ourselves out of trouble, to save ourselves from punishment. And as well, our Torah portion is full of it. Our country is full of lies. We don't even know what the truth is right now. So are we just incapable of being truthful? The Midrash seems to say that's the way we were created. But it also points out that the seal of Hashem is truth. On the other hand, it suggests we shouldn't have even been created at all. The Hasidic master Rebbe Gedaliah of Linitz offers us a path. He says, it should be obvious to anyone who pays attention that the quality of truth is the vital force sustaining all creation. Truth is contained even in the husks, the klipot, and it is its force that sustains them as well. This is the mystery, the teaching of the sages. Any falsehood that does not also have some truth in it will not in the end be sustained. And that last thing from the sages came from the Babylonian Talmud, Sota 35a. So when Rabbi Gedaliah says that truth is the vital force, he is giving us his view of a characteristic of Hashem. Hashem is the vital life force that unfolds through time and space, that renews creation moment by moment. And when we say that truth then is Hashem's seal, then truth is the essence of life itself. And that there must be truth at the core of everything that exists. But as we are all experiencing right now, especially in America, truth can be hidden. We've learned in our Musar study that things hide our spark. It can also hide the truth. Husks. These things are called husks. These husks are called klipot. Things that they're kind of like the husks of a corn cob. The husks are on the outside and they cover up those beautiful yellow corn kernels. And the corn kernels are still there, but they're covered up by these exterior husks, these klipot. Klipot also cover and hide the truth. But like corn kernels in a corn on the cob, the truth is still in there somewhere. Sometimes we really have to search for it. In fact, though, without truth, lies cannot exist either. At this point, our book returns us back to our Torah portion, back to an earlier time in Rivka's life, the mother of the twins. And she's having a particularly difficult pregnancy and suffering. And she goes to Hashem and says, why am I suffering in this pregnancy? And this is what he answers. 2 people are in your belly. 2 nations shall branch off from each other as they emerge from your womb. 1 people shall prevail over the other. The elder shall serve the younger. This is from Bereshit 25, 22 through 23. So Rivka knew the outcome of the future of her 2 sons' lives. So maybe she thought that in helping Yaakov deceive his father, that she was in some way doing the will of Hashem. But when we lie, there are consequences. And there are consequences for this family as well. The enmity between the sons, between Esau and Yaakov, never went away and remain even to this very day. The more lies we spread, the more husks grow and cover not only the divine spark, but the divine essence that we would put off into the world. The less we are able to discern the truth, the more we bring suffering to ourselves and those around us. So what can we do? The first step in any change, if you're breaking a bad habit, you're wanting to start a new midot, the first step is always awareness. We have to pay particular attention to ourselves, to our behavior, to our thoughts, to our instincts. First thing, notice when is it easy to tell the truth and when do we feel the instinct to resort to a lie? When we feel the instinct, the desire to want to lie, we need to look deeper in ourselves and find out why we are needing to lie. First, we need to ask, what is really the truth? And is there some kernel of truth hidden in that lie we are about to tell? And how would things turn out differently compared to what the consequences might be if we lie, if we were to tell the truth? And if we were to acknowledge that hidden kernel of truth instead of going with our instinct and telling a lie. We humans may be made up of lies, but we are also made in the divine image. So by bringing more truth into the world, we can bring more of the divinity of Hashem into the world and lessen the suffering for everyone, ourselves as well as the world. Okay, so at the end of each chapter in the Musar commentary, he gives us some questions to ponder. The first one goes back to Rabbi Gedaliah. Rabbi Gedaliah understands truth to be the defining characteristic of the life force of the universe. Would you agree or disagree? Do you see something else? Or do you see how truth is connected to the life force of everything? Second question is, think of an example in your own experience in which a lie was the husk and in the center was the truth. What husk covered that? What was the klipot that kept the truth from showing forth? Fear, lack of humility, self-preservation. What is that husk? As with Musar, there's always practice, always action. They say if you're working on the midot of truth this week, make it a practice to notice, again, to be aware each time your instinct is to distort the truth in any way. And take a moment and stop and ask yourself, is there an element of hidden truth that is just yearning to come out and be noticed? Record these discoveries in your journal. As always, it's very important. You will learn a lot from writing these observations down. Okay, well, that is our lesson for today. We had two very, very hard midot, patience and truth. If either of these are your particular midot for the week, I pray for you and I pray that you will grow greatly in either one of these that you are working on. Please don't forget your journal. It's quite important. Even though you may struggle with it, do it anyway. I hope you have a great week. Enjoy the weather. We will have Bezrat Hashem Musar next Tuesday before Thanksgiving. And I hope that you have a great week and that you will come back and join us next week as we continue to work on our midot and strengthen our Avodah Hashem. Have a great week.